Shalom, and welcome to What the Watchman Sees, a ministry that will sift through all of the social media noise to show you news of importance from the Most High's perspective. As watchmen, we are here both to warn of dangers and give biblical answers for dwelling in the secret place of the Most High during these times of confusion. Tell your family and friends to like, share, and subscribe as we delve into what Yahweh has for us, the apple of His eye. Let's get to work. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are going to engage in a extended study and meditation on this Shabbat. We're talking about the necessity for the Most High's people to be fruitful and to multiply and to replenish the earth. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. We will be looking at a slide presentation that was done. So let me give the background for what we're going to be looking at. This presentation that you're going to be seeing is about ethnic cleansing. It's time for the dots to be connected. Sometimes we get confused as to not necessarily what is happening, but how it connects with other things that are going on. So this meditation is focusing on what the Most High, through the Holy Spirit, wants us as His people to understand about our current situation. So we have to start with Revelation chapter 12, where it speaks of the dragon and the woman. The woman that is in Revelation chapter 12 is Yasharel, is Israel, that she was clothed with the sun, and the moon was under her feet, and upon her head was a crown of 12 stars. That chapter is a explanation of what we are experiencing in 2026. So it's time that everything has been lining up for the past few centuries to this point. Let me just say one other thing that we'll come back to. These times are not only recorded in Scripture, they're not only being they have not only been prophesied about, but in every culture and every sector of the society, or the societies in this world, individuals and groups and systems are talking about how we're in a different space and time now, that things have come and are coming to a head. Something else is on the horizon. So all of those things are happening. And in many cases, I can remember when we were first youngsters in the faith, and we would hear the elders talking about the last days. We know that the last days began at the resurrection. However, the way that the last days and the last of the last days are being described in Scripture puts us pretty much where we are right now. And so we keep hearing about the fact that the world is ending. There's some cataclysmic event that's on the horizon. Everybody feels it. Everybody knows that something is getting ready to happen. And that's why it's so important for the Most High's people to be the beacon, if you will, not only of light, but of hope in this present day, because that's why we're here. But we get confused along with everyone else, and we get distracted by the immediate examples of what the prophecies have already stated, and get we get lost in the weeds, so to speak. So we're trying to see this picture from the level of the forest rather than the level of the blades of grass in the forest. So in other words, we're looking at the big picture on this one. So what we're going to do is bring up a presentation, and we're going to start with, it's called 2 Centuries of Ethnic Cleansing and Genocide for Territory and Resources. This is a global historical analysis of how ethnic cleansing and genocide have been used to seize land, to seize labor, and to seize resources. So many times we are given examples from Scripture in a prophetic way that we shove off into compartments, and therefore we can't see why the prophecies were given in the first place. Nearly all prophecies are social, political, geopolitical in nature. The whole purpose of prophecies is so that we, as the Most High's people, can understand how we are to navigate in this world system, or how we are to navigate in spite of the world system. But the world system is a geopolitical system. Politics is all in the prophetic word. When you look at prophecy, it has to do with how the Most High's people need to be on post, so to speak, during whatever time of life that they're living. So during the time period that we're looking at here, and actually it starts a lot earlier than that, but this is just for the last couple of centuries, they are directly related to what the scriptures have been telling us was going to happen. Okay. And so the idea of ethnic cleansing and genocide are a result of the seed of the serpent. Those are some of the tools that the seed of the serpent uses specifically to get at the seed of the woman, and that's who Yasharel, that's who the 12 tribes are. And we're not the primary objective. The primary objective is to remain the ruler of this planet for as long as possible, knowing that Yah's people are going to be given that responsibility. And in order for that to happen, Yeshua has to come. So the ultimate goal is to create a world system that makes it nearly impossible for righteousness to rule on the planet. That's what this is all about. And that comes directly out of the pit of hell from the serpent and the seed of the serpent. Okay. So with that being said, looking at genocide as a tool for getting control over land, resources, and people, it's an intentional destruction of a group based on ethnicity, religion, or nationality. And that's why it's important for us to understand this from a biblical perspective. Genocide is intentional, and it targets specific people. Ethnic cleansing, which is forced removal of a group to create an ethnically homogeneous area, is one of the tools of genocide. Okay. So what are the common motives? What we just were talking about? The motive is get control of land, get the wealth, get the power, the ideology that supports all of those activities, and then making sure that nobody else can overcome it. So that's why genocide and ethnic cleansing become tools in a geopolitical sense that is actually playing itself out in the realm of the spirit. So in the 19th century, there were some examples, starting with the land that we live in the United States, the Indian Removal Act of the 1830s. Now, although the 1830s are listed here, as soon as there was a critical mass of European people of European ancestry on this continent, they immediately began to eliminate the people who were already here. The genocide started almost immediately. And so by the time of 1830s, the Plains Wars would be an example of that. The displacement of Native Americans by either killing them off, or there's also such a thing as paper genocide, and at some point we can talk about that too, because everyone was not killed, but the people group was destroyed. And sometimes the way that you destroy a people group is to give them another identity. And then so that's in the United States of North America. In Argentina, the conquest of the desert happened in the 1870s and 80s, and that also was against the indigenous peoples. In the German Empire, Herero and Nama genocide of 1904 through 1908 in Namibia. Why? Because of land, because of resources, and ultimately control of the souls that lived in those areas. Then we get to the early 20th century, where the Ottoman Empire was ending, but there was an Armenian, Assyrian, and Greek. There were Armenian, Assyrian, and Greek genocides in 1915 through 1923 for the same reason that we've been talking about. In the Soviet Union, Holodomor and ethnic deportations happened in the 1930s through the 50s. That's when, if you remember, Stalin killed millions of people. Okay, so and that's another thing too. The reason why we're looking at these things is because this has happened and will continue to happen throughout the entire planet, and it's because of the desire of the serpent to maintain absolute control over the planet. We know about Nazi Germany, but we also have to understand that Nazi Germany was one example, not the primary example. And most of what happened in Nazi Germany, most of the protocols they got from the United States of America. And if you want to know what would have happened had the Nazis won, all you have to do is look at South Africa, because that is that same spirit. Okay, then in the mid to late 20th century in China, the Tibetan and Uyghur cultural suppression. In Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge genocide that happened when I was in my mid 20s. That caused a lot of us who were calling ourselves, radicals or whatever. It caused a lot of us to re-examine things, because Cambodia was in that area where Vietnam was, and we wanted to identify with the so-called, with the quote-unquote people of those areas. But the people of those areas, once the U.S. military left that region in Cambodia, many of the regular people were killed in mass numbers for the same reasons that we've been talking about. Okay, then we get to Guatemala in the Maya massacres during the Civil War of the 1980s. In Africa, Congo, the Free State atrocities under Belgium. So all of these are examples of the notion of ethnic cleansing and genocide for the purpose of acquiring land, resources, and absolute control over other people. And it hasn't stopped. The Rwandan genocide, where at least 800,000 Tutsi and moderate Hutu were killed. In Bosnia, in the early 1990s, the ethnic cleansing that went on in Bosnia. In the Sudan, from 2003 to the present, the displacement of non-Arab groups. Basically, so that you understand who the non-Arab groups are, those are the original people who lived in that land. And the Arabs, who actually are really Turks that have now populated the North African region, they're the ones that are conducting these genocides in the Sudan and Darfur, Myanmar, 2016 to the present. So it's a phenomenon. It's a reality that is as old as we've been on the planet, unfortunately. Common tactics and patterns, the dehumanization of the target group is always essential. The propaganda portraying the targets as pests or threats, the forced displacement, the marches, the refugee camps. You can think about the Trail of Tears. You can think about what's happening as we speak with the ICE facilities. And that's only in this part of the world. And in other parts of the world, there are similar things happening. The economic seizure, confiscation of land and assets, cultural erasure, DEI becoming a byword, the banning of languages, destroying of heritage. It's all been done before. It's all continuing up to the present day. And again, the underlying motivations, resources, justified as economic development, by the way, ideological purity, defending a culture or a people group or a nation, political control framed as security or counterinsurgency. All of these are markers of genocide and ethnic cleansing. So the global trends and the impact, an estimated 200 plus million deaths and displacement over 2 centuries. I think that's a low number, actually. Population shifts across Europe, Africa, and the Americas. The emergence of international law, the Nuremberg trials, Genocide Convention, the ICC. Those are some of the ways that worldwide organizations have tried to deal with these things, but it's almost like putting your finger in a dike. There are population shifts going on currently. We know that that's happening on the continent of Africa, but it's also happening in Europe. What do we learn from that? And how can we try to mitigate it? I don't know if we can prevent it, because again, it's not random human behavior. It's a spirit, the spirit of the seed of the serpent. But in any case, some of the early warning indicators we have been experiencing in our our neck of the woods, hate speech, propaganda, demographic targeting. The media plays a huge role. And this is something that it's time for these things to be said. There is no such thing as neutral media. All of the media is owned by the same people who are prosecuting these activities. You can't get news from any of the so-called news outlets. You get propaganda. That is also true in the judicial system. So if you're going to prevent it, an independent media is going to have to be reestablished. Courts are going to have to be repopulated with righteous people instead of those who are working on behalf of the entities prosecuting genocide and ethnic cleansing. We already talked about the ongoing crises. Okay, so that's in essence the information. Here are some references. Some of them are older and some of them are relatively new. And I want to, obviously, all of them are important, but I just wanted you to see that people have been talking about this. This is not only is it not new, it is devastating to people groups, and that's why it's been written about. This number 8, the genocide studies, that it's called Pathways Ahead, and it comes out of Rutgers University. I would suggest that you, if you get a chance, to try to read some of that. The United Nations had a genocide convention in 1948. That now certainly that was about a specific people group, but there are entities in place to mitigate these things. The problem is almost all of this ignores the spiritual root. So the actors change, but the spirit remains the same. We spend too much time trying to, in reaction to the actors, the people who are currently in charge. And that's not to say that should not be done, but what it does is it limits our ability to affect change from a biblical perspective, because these things can be dealt with. What you see on the screen here is the result of hundreds of years of attempts by satanic entities to destroy a people group. This has been going on for many, many years. I'm just going to tell you what this is first, and then I'll come back. And so you can't read the top, but it talks about it's the general fertility rate by race and ethnicity from 1990 to 2023. The blue is the non-Hispanic white. The orange is non-Hispanic black. And then the green is Hispanic. Okay. Now this is 30 years. And the fertility rate is basically how the population is reproducing itself. Are more people being born than are dying at a higher rate? Because that's what a healthy population looks like. And let me tell you why I'm focusing on this. I'm focusing on it specifically to point out what's happening with Black families. But we are just the tip of the iceberg. This is a 30-year snapshot of 100-year of public policy that has created this graph. People left to their own devices will have children because, believe it or not, what the Most High told the man and the woman in Genesis 1 is still applicable. The way that we continue life on this planet is by having children. Be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. But if your group wants what another group has, then they will work to interrupt or disrupt that natural tendency that exists with all human beings on the planet. So, in the past 400 years, and then we'll get back to this most recent 30, the desire of the ruling class in the United States of America has been to set up a system where they are perpetually in absolute control the land, its resources, and the souls that live on the land. It's a very small group of people. They have very specific objectives, and part of their objective is to keep the masses of people occupied so that they don't focus on those who are actually running things. So, what does that have to do with the so-called black people in the United States? The concept of race, as it is presented in the United States, or the concept of racial superiority, comes about because of money and resources. And so if you belong in that group, whiteness is at the top and blackness is at the bottom perpetually. Now, the way that it is being experienced is through what is called slavery, and which still exists. But the purpose is to make sure that that people group never gets to the point where they change that dynamic. And that's how this country, that's how the laws that have been written work. Is for that purpose. The issue, however, up until relatively recent, is that regardless of what the seed of the serpent, and that's who I'm saying these people are, regardless of what the seed of the serpent has been trying to do to Yah's people, because we're Yah's people, we have always overcome whatever it was that was put against us. And to put it in more blunt terms, we still kept having babies, and they had a problem with that. And that's why they established the eugenics movement. That's why they established Planned Parenthood. All of those are designed to address the fact that there's too many of Yah's people doing well. We can't have that because eventually they will end up ruling us. And so that has been consistent in the public policy of the United States of America. Now, I'm only talking about the USA for right now. However, since this has been going on for 400 years, at some point in this, and I think it happened in my generation, to be honest with you, we got tired and we began to succumb to this litany of actions against us as a people which is where the whole idea of making it against the law for several people, for more than 3 or 4 people to be on the streets. They used to. This was during Jim Crow. They called it the vagabond laws. All of those were designed to make existing outside of their absolute control against the law. And so then the people who were arrested could then be leased out, and their labor could be used for the people who were ruling things. So the convict leasing piece happened. That's still happening, okay? Or the fact that the war against drugs that was begun in the 80s was designed. Actually, it started in the early 70s with marijuana and heroin being put into the Black community, and of course made against the law so that people could be arrested. But and it nearly destroyed the community. Make no mistake about that. But still, we rose. And so then they had to refine the way that they were coming at the community. So then what they did was they started looking at, okay, there's too many college educated people, and everybody knows that if at that point, if you were college educated, that was a pathway to the middle class. Now, working in the factories was also a pathway to the middle class, but even those who were working in the factories, when they had children, they wanted their children not to have to work as hard. And so this whole class of people was being developed that was doing quite well for itself. And when that was realized, then that group of people was targeted. And the way that they were targeted was what we call the negative response to affirmative action. Affirmative action was started by the Nixon administration. It was designed to make white people mad because Black people were getting jobs that they shouldn't have had in terms of what those who were white thought. And so that caused it was a direct attack on the Black middle class. And the people in the Black middle class were blind and deaf and dumb when it came to understanding what was being done to them. So now we're at a situation where not only is there less of a Black middle class, but they have honed to a science the ability to get drugs into the community, to get guns into the community, and to give those drugs and those guns to young Black men, thus and then in control, because they also control the music industry, where much of our cultural heritage is. When they took over the music industry, they also had those who owned the media also owned the prison system. And then they worked in concert with judges in the system to produce this pipeline that everybody talks about, but we can't stop it from happening. Now, why is all of that being said? It's because the ultimate goal is this chart here. The ultimate goal is for us to stop having babies. So in 1990, there was an 85% fertility rate. Okay. Now in 2023, I'm talking about with Black families. Now in 2023, the rate has declined by nearly 30%. We're barely reproducing ourselves. This was not by happenstance. This was on purpose. It's a result of the war being waged against Yah's people by the seed of the serpent. That's why I'm suggesting that we have to see the spiritual ramifications of it. So while we're praising the Lord, and while we're talking about how things should happen in the church, or what's not happening in the church, the spiritual realm has been moving and shaking in the geopolitical realm and making the current reality what it is. Now, that's just talking about the black people. There's another dynamic that I haven't I think this might be the first time you will have heard this from me. When you mess with Yah's people, you might win in the short run, but in the long run, you will be destroyed. You as a people group will be destroyed. And when you look at the sojourn of Yah's people, starting from Genesis and going all the way up through Revelation, you will see that when people come against Yah's people, even if Yah's people are dead wrong, those who come against them will be dealt with by Yah. So this other line of people, this is the non-Hispanic white community who have been either the initiators or the benefactors of this by the public policies that have been initiated, or they have been silent when those who were native to this land were completely eviscerated. So what has ended up happening with them is they have stopped having children, and eventually they're going to go extinct, which is the very thing that they've been trying to prevent for these 400 plus years. And so that's the other part of this thing. And I'm just going to put one other thing up here, and then we'll stop. This is that same information, but I wanted to share some of the other stuff as well. This, by the way, came from an inquiry through ChatGTP. Okay. And so it says here the percentage of Black women aged 15 through 49 who have had at least one child, according to national statistics based on the National Health Statistic Reports spanning the 2010s, about 61% of non-Hispanic Black women aged 15 through 49 had ever had a biological child. So that's the number that we're looking at. Okay. For context, the birth rate, which is what we were looking at on the screen, which measures births per 1,000 women per year among Black women aged 15 through 44, was 5.8% in 2023, meaning roughly 5.8 births occurred per 100 Black women of childbearing age that year. In order to bear children, you have to be with a man. If your men are in jail, that's going to affect your ability to bear children. If you have bought the idea that your body belongs to you, then what you do when you do get pregnant is you have an abortion, and your body does belong to you. You can do whatever you want to with it. Here are the results. So the birth rate among white and Latino women, among white women, is 51.7 births per 1,000. Among Hispanic women is 64.7 births per 1,000. So the white women's birth rate is 5.17%, and the Hispanic is 6.4%. Now, these figures are based on general fertility rates in 2023. So between 1990 and the late 2010s, fertility rates declined by 30% or more for Hispanic women, 29% for Black women, and 9% for non-Hispanic white women, which means that these public policies, when it comes to people of color, are working. Now, there's something else that's happening, because in the white community and in the conservative white community, they have started having children again. So, see, they've been talking about this for the past 30 years. They saw these same numbers, and then they decided, okay, well, what do we have to do about this? And they're already addressing that. The reason why the alarm is being sounded for our people is because we have been told for so many years that we have a high birth rate. That is not the case anymore. And the reason why it's not high is because of all of the public policies and business practices that have made having children a negative rather than a positive. So whether it's putting so many of our young Black men in jail, this isn't even to talk about the drugs that they're giving our children. That's a whole nother issue. But what it is to say is that if we leave the Most High out of this equation, we are headed for extinction. That's not his will. But that's why the Bible talks about a remnant of Yah's people surviving the times that we're living in. So then the question becomes, are you interested in being a part of that remnant? Because the overwhelming majority of our people are already not showing up on anything because they don't exist. All of those plans have been working. I do have to finally say, part of my job is to connect dots for people. I understand that. But there are people who are much smarter than me. How come you're not hearing them talk about this? And the ones who are talking about, see, the only people who would really be interested in the well-being of a people group are those who are not self-centered and selfish. That used to be a hallmark of our people. We weren't self-centered. We weren't selfish. We've been around these demons so long that we have taken on their ways. In other words, they have become our gods. And therefore, our community is dying right before us. And we're blaming all the wrong people, and we're giving all the wrong reasons. All we're doing is reacting. The Father doesn't want his people reacting. And that's why he said, come out from among her and be separate and touch not the unclean thing. But there's only going to be a remnant doing that. I pray that you're part of that, that you will be part of that remnant. This is just to show you how consistent this demonic activity has been. And we're only talking about the United States of America. Africa's worse, not because it's got a whole bunch of Black people, but because their leaders have been picked by the same people who are the seed of the serpent in other places around the world. And I'm not saying that there aren't things happening with Africa, but they have the same problems that everyone else has. Yah is not at the center of their nations. And many of those nations that sold us into slavery and are the ones that are suffering the most. Nobody wants to talk about that either, because not only did they do it, they're proud of what they did. They're not sorry for what they did because they never saw us as a part of them. Yah's people have been the ones who were sojourning, including on the continent of Africa. But the potential for Africa to be the center of all that is positive is there. They just got to bring us back home. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. So again, in the United States of America, we know about slavery, legal ownership of persons, Jim Crow, segregation and terror, early 1900s, scientific racism, immigration control, post-civil rights policy, making economic attacks, coded rhetoric, and today I would change this. It is an extremist movement for, if you look at the last 30 years, but the people who are in charge of the government, who are in charge of the White House, they are extremists, but they're also the heart and soul of this country. And that's why they need to be there. This country is either going to have to eliminate itself or be eliminated. And what I mean by that, you're going to have, United States of America, you're going to have to stop being white. If you can't do that, you're doomed because you came up with that mess. So much. I might do another whole lesson on this. So in any case, Father, bless you and keep you. Father, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Father, lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom.